will send you back to the depths of Hades!
You are becoming all I'd hoped you'd be, Kratos. Now, with your wife and child dead, nothing will hold you back.
Athena, rid me of the memories that haunt me still.
You have done well, Kratos. Though we mourn the death of our brother, the gods are indebted to you.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me. Turn back to Olympus, beast! I must face Zeus! You defy the god of war!
No son should destroy his own father.
No, I have no father. If all on Olympus will deny me my vengeance, then all on Olympus will die. I have lived in the shadow of the gods for long enough. Zeus, your son has returned! I bring the destruction of Olympus! What will you do, father? You can no longer hide behind the skirts of Athena.
Athena is dead because of the rage that consumed her. What more will you destroy?
Then prepare for your death, Poseidon.
Look who it is! Kratos, the ghost of Sparta. The fallen god. Cursed mortal.
No! This is my war, not yours. My vengeance ends now.
God of War 1 was an exceptional game and was met with immediate praise for its combo-based combat and Greek mythology story. It shows with God of War selling more than 4.6 million copies, making it one of the top 15 best-selling PlayStation 2 games of all time, and being regarded as one of the best action-adventure games for the PlayStation, and it won several Game of the Year awards. God of War 2 improves on everything from the original game and enhances and expands the experience of God of War. Several people named God of War 2 the best PlayStation 2 game of all time. It was also the best-selling game in the UK during the week of its release and went on to sell 4.24 million copies worldwide, making it the 16th best-selling PlayStation 2 game of all time. In just 3 years, God of War became one of, if not the most popular video game on the PlayStation. God of War 2 ended on a cliffhanger, leaving everyone craving for more, and the pressure was on Santa Monica to deliver an unbelievable experience for players. So with all of this ambition, patience, and hype for a single game, let's find out if God of War 3 delivers. Cory Barlog came back to direct God of War 3, meaning to make the best God of War game in the trilogy, but left after the first 8 months of development for other opportunities, so Stig Asmundson took over as game director. Asmundson previously was lead environment artist and art director on God of War 1 and 2, respectively, so he was a great choice for a game director. Cory Barlog had a major impact on God of War 3, and although he had left the team, he had spoken with the team making God of War 3 several times afterwards and bounced a few ideas off him. Asmundson said that one of the greatest challenges in developing God of War 3 for the PlayStation 3 was the complexity of everything. Individual tasks such as designing hair for characters would take a long time because the level of detail that was expected was so high and intricate. By December of 2009, the game was in its final development stages, and finally in 2010 we got the finale to the God of War trilogy with God of War 3. And God of War 3 released to critical acclaim, and the game went to sell 5 million copies, being the first 2 games' sales.
Zeus! Your son has returned! I bring the destruction of Olympus!
God of War 3 is a good looking game, and I don't think I'm in the minority when saying that. The textures look so good, and the character models look great, and a big step up from God of War 2's character models. And the remastered touch-ups are great. It's hard to believe that God of War 2 and 3 were on the same console because God of War 3 looks leagues better than God of War 2. The cutscenes look spectacular with the camera moving around in action moments and taking close-ups in stern moments, really continuing the theme of the game being shot like a film. The remaster of God of War 3 also supports 60 frames per second, and seeing the cutscenes at 60 beautiful frames per second is out of this world, and I still can't get over it. The game looks great, and I'm just going to let the footage speak for itself. The graphic fidelity in this game is great, with detail, resolution, and frame rate all being good for the most part. The detail of God of War 3 is amazing, like the water splashing effects, weather reflections, and Kratos' armor to name a few. Before we see the title screen, we see this beautiful opening sequence of the story up till now. The art is amazing, and is a great way to reintroduce players into the God of War story. We then see the title screen with a beautiful model of Kratos on the side like always, with him moving his head around and him looking as angry as ever. And we have the God of War 3 logo in the middle as always, with destruction in the background. The title screen here looks amazing. It's probably my new favorite title screen for the God of War franchise. The user interface in this game is very similar to the first two God of War games, with the health, magic, and weapon bar on the side and your combo meter on the other side of the screen if you're fighting. And if you're not fighting, the screen has nothing on it, making for a simple but great user interface. The areas are as huge as ever, with areas like the Underworld, Olympia, and Mount Olympus having immeasurable polish, design, and detail. Kratos has more brutal animations, with him smashing his enemies to the ground, snapping their necks, or putting his fist into their stomach, showing how angry Kratos has gotten. Some of the most gruesome deaths are in this game, like Poseidon's death in his own perspective and Helios' death. Santa Monica really expands the God of War lore in this game, with a lot more readable books, notes, and more paintings to look at, which tell you stuff about characters, items, and locations, which is really neat. The voice acting in this game is as good as ever, which is kind of surprising since there are very few returning actors from God of War 2. Only a couple like Terrence C. and Corey Burton return, but the new talent is great, with Aaron Torpley, Natalie Lander, and Rip Torn doing great performances in their own respects. Terrence takes a different approach with Kratos' voice, with him sounding more cocky and arrogant. I do like this portrayal of Kratos, but I do like the more stern and angry Kratos from the first two games. God of War 3 also has a newly implemented photo mode, so you can take pictures of Kratos and his environments. The options for photo mode are camera, frame, filter, and bloom. There isn't too much options in photo mode, but it is cool that you can take photos at all in this game. The collectibles in this game are the basic Gordon eyes and magic feathers, and new Minotaur horns. There are also new items to find, like Hades' helm, Zeus' eagle, and Hercules' shoulder guard, to name a few. The soundtrack in this game is spectacular, with tracks like the dark and intimidating title screen theme or the overture theme. The tracks are on par with the first two games, and even beat some of the first two games' tracks. The soundtrack here is more quiet and then transitions into a crescendo during the fights. Overall, the presentation in this game is amazing and better than most games today, and is definitely the best out of the trilogy.
I grow weary, my son.
There have been a multitude of improvements and new attacks Kratos can now do, like how you can hold L1 and press circle to charge at an enemy, and you can now grab enemies and use them as running shields, which is good when fighting a barrage of enemies. You can also now dodge in the air, which is a great change, since before if you threw someone in the air but you didn't want to, for example, you were locked in that animation until it was over. But now if you go in the air, you can dodge whenever you want, which is pretty good. The combat looks great because of the amazing graphics I talked about before. The combat looks ferocious and barbaric, with blood on Kratos after every fight. Replacing the Rage of the Titans from the first two God of War games are the Rage of Sparta, where you can now use the Blade of Olympus in battle, which is really cool and feels powerful to use. You can use the Blade of Olympus in God of War 2, but that was after you beat the game, but now you can use the Blade of Olympus in the very first mission of the game. There are also now new tools to help you in battle. Replacing the Titan's bow from God of War 2 are the Bow of Apollo, which basically has the same properties as the Titan's bow. Helios' head is a way to shine light on objects to find secret stuff, and you can also shine light on enemies to stun them, which is good in combos. And Hermes' boots make you dash at enemies, making enemies get out of your way. All of these tools are on a time-based system, which is good, so even when you have no magic in battle, you can still use tools to help you. but to balance this out, you can only use a tool a certain amount of time before it has to recharge. The weapon selection makes a return in this game with a whole new set of weapons and items for Kratos to get. At the start of the game, we have the Blades of Athena, but surely lose the blades for the Blades of Exile, which work basically the same to the original Blades of Chaos and Blades of Athena. We also have Hades' Claws, which is cool with a purple tint on the blades, and cool new animations for Kratos, but are very similar to the Blades of Exile. We then have the Nemesis Whip, which is basically the same thing again, but with electrical properties. And we finally have the Nemean Cestus, which is so cool and makes Kratos more badass than he already is. The weapon selection in this game is alright. I don't really like the Hades Claws and Nemesis Whip because they're very similar to the Blades of Exile, but I absolutely loved the Nemean Cestus with its great animations for Kratos and doing a ton of damage of enemies. Magic is different in this game from other entries because magic in this game is unique to specific weapons. The first magic we get is at the start of the game when we have the Blades of Athena, which lets us use the Divine Reckoning, which allows Kratos to charge the ground in a surrounding area, hitting everything that might be nearby him. The magic is good, especially in crowds, but we shortly lose this magic because shortly after the first segment of the game, we lose the Blades of Athena but get the Blades of Exile in return. Once you acquire the Blades of Exile, you unlock magic called the Army of Sparta, which will summon Spartan warriors to protect Kratos, stabbing outward at any nearby enemies. This magic is good and helps you when you're in a tight situation. We then get the Claws of Hades after killing him, which gives Kratos the magic to free souls to help him in battle. This magic kinda sucks because the souls don't really do that much damage, but it's the thought that counts. The next form of magic is with the Nemesis Whip, which lets us basically use Kronos' rage from the last game. And the final form of magic is with the Nemean Cestus, which packs a punch. With the Nemean Cestus, we get to use the Nemesis War, which slams the ground surrounding Kratos, creating shockwaves that affect everyone within that area. The magic here is good, but certainly magic like the Souls of Hades don't have that much of a purpose. Though I do like the magic selection here more than God of War 2, I still think the original game had the best and most balanced magic selections. The interactive cutscenes make a return and feel as rewarding as ever, with Kratos having brutal and different finishers for every type of enemy, which is amazing because even modern games won't have this level of detail. Most games will have the character have one finisher for every enemy, but not in God of War. Speaking of enemies, returning enemies are undead soldiers, minotaurs, and cyclopses to name a few. There are a lot of new enemies such as scorpions, which are basically distractions in battle and can be killed with a grab. The living statues are also really cool and are new to the game, and wield a giant hammer as the weapon that you have to dodge. The organs are similar to Medusa from God of War 1, but they can freeze Kratos in an instant, making them a big threat in battle. They also brought back the Cyclops, which are from the first game, and are dangerous as ever with a wrecking ball with spikes on one of their hands. Replacing the Pegasus sections from God of War 2 are the diving sections with Icarus's wings. These sections are really cool and unique and are a great change of pace from the crazy and brutal combat. It's just sad that these sections are few and far between in the game. Chests can also now have mixed orbs in them, which is a pretty cool touch. And you can also ride on certain enemies, kind of like in Batman Arkham Asylum, which is really cool and helps you kill crowds of enemies. The level design in this game is as good as always, with a lot of hidden rooms, items, and locations for you to find, and if you're that kind of gamer. The pacing in the levels are great as well, with the first mission being a great example. We start the game fighting enemies in Gaia's back, allowing the game to give new players a quick tutorial on combat and to refresh new players on the combat. The level design is also a lot bigger in scale, and is a great example in the first mission where you're on Gaia's back and the transition between gameplay to cutscene is great and seamless. Poseidon then comes in and throws a titan in the water and comes out of the water appearing as a seahorse and climbs up the Mount Olympus to try to take Kratos and Gaia down. And Kratos is tasked to take out the beast, which transitions into our first boss fight. This first part of the boss fight is great with amazing cinematography, voice acting, and is a great sight to see. We also get introduced into our first interactive cutscene, which is as great as always. Kratos is then thrown on the mountain and we get to do a bit of platforming. We then enter the Tomb of Ares and kill a centaur. We then immediately get jumped by the seahorse again, where we have to fight him again. In this second part of the boss fight, we fight him, but we get thrown inside Gaia, where we do our first puzzle and then escape. We then go to the head of Gaia, where Poseidon is forced to reveal himself, where we take Poseidon down. And this final part of the boss fight is great, with Kratos killing the sea monster and with Poseidon on his knees. We get one of the coolest but most gruesome moments in the entire franchise, where we see Kratos brutally killing Poseidon from his point of view, before snapping his neck and letting him fall down Mount Olympus to his death. I love this sequence for its amazing choreography and amazing voice acting and brutality. Once Poseidon falls to the sea, all of Greece is flooded. Kratos then confronts his father, where Zeus gets pissed off and throws lightning at Kratos and Gaia, where Gaia is about to fall off Mount Olympus and lets Kratos fall down to the underworld. This opening mission is my favorite from this series, with its great boss fight, cinematography, and reintroduction to the God of War controls and lore. Let's finally talk about the boss fights in this game. I'll skip Poseidon's boss fight since I just talked about it, but let's talk about the smaller bosses first. Helios isn't really a boss, but more of an interactive cutscene where you rip off his head. The fight against Kronos is really imaginative, but it's really just you fighting enemies with a couple of interactive cutscenes and platforming in the mix. With those smaller boss fights out of the way, let's look at the big bosses with the Greek god of the underworld, Hades. The first part of the boss fight sees Kratos going head to head with Hades, dodging his blades and attacks. Once you do enough damage, you get to rip off a chunk of his flesh off. The next phases of the fight are similar but with added enemies. Eventually, Hades will cut a hole in the battlefield, which causes a tug of war. And this part of the boss fight is cool because you have to fight Hades while not falling through the hole he created. You then bash Hades' head a few times, steal his claws, and then he drops down to the river Styx. The boss fight seems to be over, but surprise, Hades is still alive and larger than before. Here we have to dodge his attacks and get him when he's at a weakened state. We then take Hades' own soul and keep his soul into the claws we took from earlier, concluding the fight. This boss fight is great. It makes you really think on your feet in battle. The next boss fight is versus Hermes. This isn't really your typical combat boss fight because most of the boss fight is just you using your platforming skills to catch up to Hermes, and it's pretty fun until the combat portion of the fight arrives. All Hermes does is run around for a bit and hit you once in a while. All you have to do is hit him until the interactive cutscene arrives where you cut off his legs. This boss fight is fun but disappointing. The next boss fight is versus one of the most iconic figures of Greek mythology, Hercules. The first part of the fight is just you killing undead enemies until Hercules joins the fight with his gauntlets, where you have to drive him into a wall of spikes. Eventually, Kratos takes his gauntlets and you have to fight an unharmed Hercules until Hercules breaks a huge part of the battlefield, almost knocking Kratos off. But when Kratos climbs back on, he kills Hercules with his own gauntlets. The boss fight is good but very unoriginal and doesn't add any new layer of originality. The next boss fight is versus a giant scorpion and his rocks on her legs that you can only break using the Nemean Cestus. This boss fight reminds me of the Kraken boss fight in the second game. It's cool and the creature looks fearsome at first, but actually it's a pretty easy boss. And the final boss is versus the Greek king of Olympus himself, Zeus. The fight starts in a 2D plane and we have to dodge Zeus's attacks. This part of the fight is a good warm-up and is very unique. This fight then transitions into the courtyard outside, kind of like in the second game. Gaia then interrupts the fight where Kratos and Zeus continue their fight in Gaia's heart. This part of the fight is hard, with Zeus making duplicates of himself and the fact that he can heal whenever he wants to. Eventually, Kratos stabs Zeus with Gaia with the Blade of Olympus, and the fight seems over with Zeus and Gaia falling off the mountain, until Zeus's spirit rises back up and grabs Kratos, where we go into Kratos' mind and see all of Kratos' hardships and challenges. Thus is a great way to see the journey we've gone on with Kratos up till now. And the final part of this fight is an interactive cutscene with Kratos brutally, and I mean brutally, killing Zeus. This fight is amazing and is worth being called the final fight of the trilogy. Overall, the boss fights in this game are mostly solid with a few exceptions here and there. There is a lot more platforming in this game compared to God of War 1 and 2, with more climbing, hanging off walls, and jumping over the stuff than before. And when you do platforming in this game, it's splendorful, with the jumping being more fluid and refined, and improvements on platforming in general, like how you can climb on birds to get more distance while platforming, and the Hermes boots, which can make Kratos run on walls, and even some boss fights like the Hermes boss fight utilize platforming in it. The puzzles in God of War 3 are hit and miss. Some puzzles are really good and take a lot of patience and perseverance to beat, but a lot of them are very simple and shouldn't even be called a puzzle. There are a couple of improvements to puzzles, like how you can rotate objects, which is great for puzzles, but in general the puzzles are basically the same from God of War 2, except that the fact that there's no time puzzles. Overall, God of War 3 has improved most of the previous game's mechanics, making this the most fluid and realistic gameplay in the entire series thus far. God of War 3 starts off exactly where God of War 2 left off, with Kratos climbing Mount Olympus on Gaia's back, telling to Zeus that he brings the destruction of Olympus. But when Kratos gets to the top of Mount Olympus to face Zeus, Zeus throws lightning at Kratos and Gaia, throwing them off guard and sends Kratos plummeting back to the depths of the underworld, and ends up getting most of his magic and red orb stolen by the river Styx. Kratos wanders around until he finds Athena that tells him that she wants to aid Kratos in his journey to kill Zeus, which makes no sense. Athena sacrifices herself for Zeus in the second game and now wants him dead? It makes zero sense. But either way, Athena then tells Kratos to find the Flame of Olympus to kill Zeus, which also makes no sense since Kratos could just use the Blade of Olympus to kill Zeus like he almost did in the second game. But either way, after exploring the underworld and meeting people like Hephaestus, Pandora, and Hephaestus, we then confront Hades and kill him in an epic boss fight before making it back to the world of the living. Kratos finds out that the Flame of Olympus is protecting Pandora's box, and the only way to free it is with Pandora herself. We set out to find Pandora and kill basically every god in our way, like Hermes, Hercules, and Helios. After all of that, Kratos finds Pandora and lets her sacrifice herself to stop the Flame of Olympus and open Pandora's box, only to find nothing. It turns out that when Kratos first opened Pandora's box to kill Ares in God of War 1, he released all the evils that were kept inside of it. These evils infected the gods and drove Zeus to kill Kratos, but Athena hid something else in the box: hope. Using the power of hope, Kratos brutally kills Zeus, leaving the world in a bad way. Athena wants the power of hope given back to her in order for her to rebuild humanity with her as their ruler. But Kratos stabs himself with the Blade of Olympus, giving the power of hope back to the land, and in a post-credit scene, we see a blood trail leading off the edge of the mountain and see the world in ruins. The story here is good, but there are a couple plot inconsistencies, like why Athena wants to help Zeus after defending him, and why Kratos has to find the Flame of Olympus. But the worst part for me is the ending. Hope. They use the power of hope to kill Zeus. A game about brutally killing the gods of Olympus ends with the power of hope. This isn't just really cheesy, but unfitting for the story being told. But that doesn't mean I hate the story by any means. I genuinely enjoyed the story quite a bit, and I liked how Kratos' arc was in this game. We start the game with Kratos wanting revenge, and we as a player also want revenge on the gods for Kratos. But as the game goes on, and the more damage Kratos does to unnecessary people, or Kratos killing Poseidon's wife, you see that Kratos is going too far. But Pandora brings a glimmer of hope back to Kratos, and by the end of the game, Kratos stabs himself with the Blade of Olympus, giving the power of hope back to the people of the world. He doesn't redeem himself, but in his final actions, Kratos chooses humanity over the monster he's become. This is a beautiful arc and concludes Kratos' story and arc in a beautiful way, until the 2018 game at least. Overall, the story is good, with a bit of up and downs in the middle of it. Overall, God of War 3 is an amazing finale to the trilogy, and Stig Asmussen does great, especially for a first-time game director. But there are problems like with the story and some of the boss fights. Still, this game does a great job satisfying fans and wrapping up Kratos' story very well. God of War is one of the only gaming franchises that has an amazing trilogy of games in my opinion, and is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. Hey everybody, thank you for watching this video. I know it was a long one of my longest yet, so thank you for sticking to the end and supporting not just this video, but everything else I post. I am truly grateful and appreciative. I honestly don't know when I'm going to upload next. It'll probably be a new title I haven't covered yet, or my Infamous 2 video. The story with Kratos isn't over yet though, with the prequel games and the latest release of God of War in 2018, which I will cover at another time. But either way, I love you guys, stay safe, and have a good one.